जैसे प्रॉब्लम ये होती है कि इंसान सोचता है कि मेरे को यार ये आइडिया है, आई कैन डू दिस, बट वो सोचता ही रह जाता है.
They don't act upon
Yeah,
it.
I think doing is a lot more important than just thinking about it. I made mistakes, I had losses, I learned out of them, and now I don't make them. Eating out is not a necessity, it's for fun.
It's a luxury.
It's a luxury. I knew a lot of people who were vegetarians but were eating eggs in cakes.
Yeah.
So this was solely because there were no cakes without eggs. So they were like, यार इतना कॉम्प्रोमाइज नहीं कर सकते, केक खाना है तो एग खाना पड़ेगा. Suddenly I got this idea that okay, I have been helping mom with making cakes for a while now. Why don't I try it for myself? And obviously it was a disaster. I was only 12. Like I would Google what is the perfect way to make a brownie, and I never saw one video and get satisfied. I used to see like 5 videos, understand those recipes. यार वो बना क्या रहे हैं? वो अगर उसने 100 grams बटर डाला है और उसने 120 डाला है, उसने क्यों ज़्यादा डाला है, उसने कम क्यों डाला है? What is the difference that is coming through? And I think it's really important in this era to not focus on just the product, but also focus on the service that you're offering. And I think education is one of the best services that you can offer as a brand.
Hi Parth, thanks for joining us for the My Locals podcast, where we try and interact with community individuals who are trying to make a difference in their own unique way. So let's begin with an introduction about yourself. You can tell people what do you do.
So my name is Parth, and I am the chef and founder of this cafe called Bloom Cafe Cakery. We have 3 outlets in Delhi. One is in Vasant Vihar, one is in Aurobindo Market, and one is in Khan Market. And recently I've also started my catering venture, which is called the Lavender Flavors. It's a bespoke vegetarian catering service, and we operate in Delhi right now.
Very nice. So let's go down like the memory lane and try and recall the first memory you have of when you found your passion for cooking. When was that first spark when you discovered this is something I really enjoy?
So cooking for me actually started at a very young age. I started when I was 5 years of age. So, and it was at my house only. But at that time, I think it was just a hobby. And I just enjoyed being in the kitchen. I think I maybe have got it from my mom because she used to cook a lot in the kitchen. And I used to, sit by her side whenever she was making a cake or whenever she was making some food for everyone. And she was a very avid cook. Like she used to go through all the tarla dalal recipes and all the Sanjeev Kapoor recipes, and she used to follow the cooking channels and stuff. And my nani again was a very brilliant cook. She the Indian typical nani household where she makes achars for you. She makes like amazing Indian sweets, जैसे malpua, अपना घी के लड्डू, and all those things. So she's from Amritsar. So there was this whole Amritsari cuisine touch as well. So my family, my mother side has been cooking a lot, and I think I may have got it from there. And that's how I entered into the kitchen at a very young age. I used to love being in the kitchen and being like, helping my mother out in anything or everything, maybe like mixing the cake batter or even tasting it after that, and doing small things like, rolling out a roti and stuff like that. So yeah, so that was like a hobby at that time. And obviously with age, you learn more and more and you get more exposed to the kitchen. So I used to try and learn new recipes from her. I used to try and learn new ways of making Indian food and stuff. So by the time I was in 12th grade, I obviously had picked up a lot, and it was a hobby till then. But then after I entered college, I started cooking more and more because you obviously have to self-sustain there. And udhar kya hua ki because I had to cook all my meals, I ended up cooking for my friends as well, because obviously you just can't cook alone all the time. And my friends were pretty impressed by the fact that, okay, this guy cooks, and we should, maybe they made friends with me. So जो भी हुआ उसमें क्या हुआ कि I realized that मेरा शौक काफ़ी बढ़ता चला गया उससे. And by that time I realized that, whenever I used to make food for them and they used to be happy after eating my food, it used to bring great pleasure to me. So, and that the same feeling was there with every single case. Like even when I made food for my family, even when I made food for my friends or anyone for that matter, there was this, this smile that comes to the faces of the people when they eat good food. So that smile, I think, was the spark, and that smile was the reason I actually entered into the industry. That smile was the reason I actually thought that, okay, now I want to do something here professionally.
No, there is a big joy to seeing like someone else being satisfied with something you make. So that definitely is a big like driving force. Do you remember the first like full dish you made? जो आपने बताया आप अपनी मम्मा को हेल्प करते थे in making the batter and like baling and everything. But वो पहली dish कौन सी थी that you composed like entirely by yourself?
So I think the first dish was a cake only. We had like a very traditional oven back then. I was only like 10, 12 years of age. And I remember my mom was not at home, my dad was not at home, like no one was at home basically. And my brother was there, and he was like, "Parth bhaiya, mujhe cake khana hai." And I don't know, suddenly I got this idea that, okay, I have been helping mom with making cakes for a while now. Why don't I try it for myself? And obviously it was a disaster. I was only 12 and I didn't have a recipe. I didn't know how to follow a recipe. मैंने बस जो मेरे को समझ आ रहा था कि हाँ मम्मा ने मुझे बता रखा है मैदा डालना होता है, बेकिंग पाउडर डालना होता है, तो मैंने अपने हिसाब से बस डाल दिया कुछ भी एंड बना दिया. एंड आई हैड दिस आया एट माई हाउस. शी वॉज आफ्टर, लाइक शी वॉज हेयर टू टेक केयर ऑफ अस. तो उन्होंने मेरे को हेल्प करी. अब उनको भी नहीं पता, उनको कैसे पता होगा कि कैसे बनाना है. तो हम लोगों ने मिक्स कर लिया, बना लिया, बेक कर लिया, ब्रिक जैसा केक बन गया थोड़ा सा, और ओवर स्वीट और पता नहीं कुछ भी बन गया. पर लेकिन हाँ, दैट वाज द फर्स्ट डिश आई वुड से दैट आई मेड फ्रॉम स्क्रैच फ्रॉम माई बाय माई सेल्फ. एंड आई थिंक नो वंस फर्स्ट डिश इज एज परफेक्ट एज इट कैन बी.
I mean, at 12, that's still fairly impressive. मैं तो बस glucon D बना रहा था at that age. I didn't even know I could cook anything. But you mentioned college being like a big place where you were making a lot of your meals yourself. You went to the UK for your college, right? So what were the influences there? Both, एक तो आप पढ़ क्या रहे थे, आपने क्या influence लिया from your education, from the environment, and also on your palate. What were things that you were trying? What different things were you exposed to and you got introduced to?
So I think going abroad, so I went abroad for my education and I went to London. I went to King's College London.
This is for your undergrad.
Yes, this was for my undergrad. I went straight after my 12th grade. And obviously, I think when you go abroad, you're exposed to a lot of things. And it was my first time in London in general. So it was a very massive thing for me, like living there by myself. And I realized that, okay, when you're in college, you have to make your own meals as well. There's no one to help you. Like India में तो हमारे घर में कभी आय आ जाती है, कभी household help हो जाता है. So it was a fairly easier process here. And you just need to, speak to your mom कि मम्मा आज रात को ये खाना है. Although you have to think, you have to get your groceries, you have to cook yourself, you have to wash your dishes, you have to keep it back so that your kitchen is clean. So it was a lot of things. But I don't know, like I think because of my passion since childhood, I had this thing कि मेरे को मज़ा आता था ये सब करने में भी. And I have this small amount of what do you call OCD. इसमें तो I always try to keep my kitchen try to keep my kitchen the cleanest. तो जब भी बनाता था साफ़ भी कर देता था. तो and I think that's when I started meeting some of my friends. Obviously first week में I started inviting them to lunches कि I cook and stuff, so why don't you come join me for a lunch. And I used to make pasta for them. I remember this first time when I made a pasta for them, and it was an Alfredo pasta, which is a white sauce pasta, and it was from scratch. So my friends were only impressed by the fact that yaar sauce scratch se bana li, because there are bottled sauces available in the market. So they were pretty impressed by the fact that this sauce scratch se banai. And I didn't realize that I'm doing something that big. I was like, sauce to scratch se hi banti hai. I didn't know that there are bottled sauces or something. So that's when I kind of, learned ki, okay, this is something that I have in addition to a normal person's cooking skill. I know how to make sauces from scratch and stuff. And I think जब भी किसी को कोई चीज़ करके वैलिडेशन मिलती है तो उसको वो चीज़ करने की मोटिवेशन भी मिलती है.
Of course.
सो जब मेरे को बहुत ज़्यादा वैलिडेशन मिलती थी अपने कुकिंग के लिए, पीपल वर वेरी हैप्पी विद द फ्लेवर्स आई वाज पुटिंग ऑन द प्लेट. Although I started with basic stuff, obviously we start with basics first, and I started with like basic pastas. I cook pasta a lot because I think it was a very easier dish to cook rather than Indian food. So उसमें मैंने ये बहुत बनाया. And then उसको बनाते बनाते मुझे ये रियलाइज़ हुआ कि यार मतलब मेरे को मज़ा तो आ ही रहा था वो बनाने में. So what I did was I started and I was getting validation also. So what I did was I started looking at a lot of YouTube videos to educate myself more and more on cooking.
Was this also during COVID when you also had more time?
I think by the time I reached COVID stage, I was already pretty sure of what I wanted to do, and already I was kind of aware of my skills. I was pretty developed by that time.
Okay.
All of this was just the first 3-4 months of the first year in my college. It was 2018.
Wow.
So उसमें ही मेरे को रियलाइज़ हुआ कि मेरे को मज़ा आ रहा है ये सब करने में, मेरे को और सीखना है. I didn't have an intention कि I want to do something professionally in this, but I always had this कि यार मज़ा आ रहा है, लोगों को खाने में भी मज़ा आ रहा है, मुझे खिलाने में भी मज़ा आ रहा है. So and King's College में we were not that busy in the first year. First years in, I think in all the universities are pretty easier.
That's
So
the time people spend like partying and doing
yeah,
all of that.
we make new friends. We see the place around. Like London is a new city, so I spend a lot of time cooking in the kitchen. So मैंने ये करता था कि नए और मेरे को मज़ा आता था नए नए चीज़ें बनाने में. So even if there was something, so I used to ask my friends that what they wanted to eat, and whenever they told me कि यार आज मुझे ये खाना है, for example XYZ pudding खानी है, मुझे नहीं पता वो कैसे बनती है, मुझे नहीं पता वो क्या होती है. I used to research about it. And the thing with me is that I don't research very superficially. I go in deep into the thing. So अगर मान लो उसमें लिखा हुआ है कि the dish uses julienne cut off carrots, I'll research how to cut vegetables. I'll research all the cuts that are available in the cooking industry. Then I started practicing those cuts. I bought a very this sort of expensive knife for myself, just to give some more motivation to myself. I remember, and it was like a big proper chef's knife. I bought a knife sharpener also with that. I didn't know how to operate it. I cut myself a lot of times. But I think I learned after all of this. Like I cut myself and I learned with the flow. And मैंने फिर वही काफ़ी खाना, और मैंने गॉर्डन रैमजी की बहुत वीडियोस देखी, मैंने शेफ रणवीर ब्रार की बहुत वीडियोस देखी, Marco Pierre White, a lot of chefs on YouTube. So, and at the same time, being in London, I was exposed to a lot of European cuisine. So there are amazing pasta places, there are amazing pizza places. I think London is one of the food hubs of the world.
Yeah.
So there are amazing cuisines available, there are amazing flavors to try. So I used to be motivated to, whenever I used to go and eat at a fancy restaurant, मेरे को मन में आता था कि यार मेरे को घर में ये चीज़ बनानी है, ये इन्होंने कैसे बनाया. That curiosity was there. So I used to come back, experiment a lot. And that I think kept me going and going. So I think London as a city had a very major influence on the fact that, okay, there was college and I had to cook my own meals. And secondly, that it was London and it was, having so many food options to try out. So my palate got really diversified in that sense. And with that, I started cooking. And on top of my cooking, I used to bake a lot. Like I mentioned, I started with baking actually.
Yeah.
And the first thing I made was a cake. So, and I think that was like a trendy time for cheesecakes. Cheesecakes were like very popular at that time.
Mm-hmm.
They're still right now, but like at that time they were like newly popular, I would say. And all of my friends were like very interested on, yaar cheesecake bana. So I used to research a lot on baking as well. And इसमें क्या करता था? And obviously when you are a student, you don't have the whole equipment with yourself. So what I did was मैं पहले शुरू में थोड़ा बहुत equipment मैंने खुद से खरीदा. And because I didn't want to, waste my parents' money on all of this. This was like a side hobby.
Yeah.
So मैंने क्या करा, थोड़ा बहुत equipment खरीदा, मैंने उससे cheesecakes बनाया. And I thought कि यार if I like to bake it, if people like to eat it, why don't I just sell it? So I started selling at these neighborhood areas in the sense that I started selling to my friends. I have a lot of friends that I sold it to. Student accommodation में हम रहते थे, students वगैरह कोई बेच देता था मैं. And London में you get a good price out of a cheesecake.
Yeah.
So I made brownies, I sold them. I made cheesecakes, I sold them. I used to watch, the perfect way to make a brownie. Like I would Google what is the perfect way to make a brownie. And I never saw one video and get satisfied. I used to see like 5 videos, understand those recipes. कि यार वो बना क्या रहे हैं, वो अगर उसने 100 grams बटर डाला है और उसने 120 डाला है, उसने क्यों ज़्यादा डाला है, उसने कम क्यों डाला है, what is the difference that is coming through. So getting into the detail of the recipe started happening. And that's when I started developing my own recipes.
But even when you were selling to people around you, the intention was not to build a business or to go into anything sort of that. It was just as an idea, okay, I like enjoying this. There is a validation. So why not do it at a slightly larger scale than just my apartment, right?
Yeah, I think the larger scale was only because of the fact I wanted to bake more.
Mhm.
And you had to buy more equipment for that. I needed an electric whisk, I needed a big bowl, I needed nice knives, nice chopping boards. And I was a kitchen enthusiast. So होता है ना, these were toys to me.
Yeah.
So I liked buying new equipment. And उस चीज़ को fuel करने के लिए I started selling. So all the money that I got, I never spent the money on, partying or buying something for myself. So all that money used to go into more kitchen equipments. So I kind of developed this whole kitchen setup where I had like amazing equipments as a student. And I used to bake more and more. I remember that when I was in college, I also opened an Indian classical music society. Not a classical, like an Indian music society where I used to sing Bollywood and stuff. So there was nothing like that. So I was the one who started it. So we had an induction for that also. That was in 2020, and right before COVID. And in induction, you have to get food for your newcomers, welcomers, and all your members of the society. So I never, and we used to get money for that from the college. So never used to, जैसे अगर मान लो हमें 150 pounds मिले to get food, I used to spend 70 pounds out of that. And because 150 pounds is a very basic amount to get food for like 50 people.
Yeah.
So, and उसमें भी Domino's ही आ पाता है. So all the societies did that. But what I did was I spent 70 pounds and I bought ingredients. I made the whole food. I made like brownies. Like I remember I made like 75 brownies in one go with the help of my friends, obviously, who were my flatmates. And I made like an array of like dips and stuff to eat with chips and stuff. So I used to save money like that, and so I think all of this was happening during 2018 to 2019, but the idea of Bloom actually came into existence in 2019.
Yeah, that was going to be my question कि validation मिल गई, there is a slightly larger scale, मज़ा आ रहा है, motivation है, and of course you have a passion for it, you've always had it. But Bloom का idea कहाँ bloom हुआ? Like when did that come across कि I want to open a cafe?
So I'll tell you, my family business is nothing to do with F&B at all. So and dur dur tak. So there is no connection. So there was never an idea, and the family business is a very old business. It's a jewelry business which has been since 1789. So when you have such an old family business, there is a tendency that you have this mindset clear that यार यही करना है लाइफ में. And I was not pressured into it. I was very keen कि हाँ मुझे यही करना है. Like this is what I want to do and this is what I am going to do. बट जब कुकिंग ऑब्वियसली जैसे हमने बताया मेरा पूरा पैशन था, मेरे को मज़ा आ रहा था करने में, सब कुछ हो रहा था. सो 2018 के एंड में बता रहा था मैं, ये एक स्टेज ऐसी आती है जब सब लोग फर्स्ट ईयर में होते हैं, काफ़ी पार्टी कर चुके होते हैं, एंड देन देर लाइक यार पार्टी पे पैसा खर्चने के लिए ना पेरेंट्स से मांगने में अच्छा नहीं लग रहा. आई थिंक देयर इज़ दिस सिचुएशन वेयर एवरी सम और द अदर चाइल्ड गेट्स इन. सो माई फ्रेंड्स एंड पेयर्स स्टार्टेड वर्किंग अलॉन, इधर उधर कोई ट्यूशन दे रहा है, कोई कुछ कर रहा है, मतलब सफाई कर रहा है कहीं रेस्टोरेंट में, यू द स्टूडेंट जॉब्स बेसिकली. सो and I realized that I have a skill which can be used in those jobs and I can get a better pay out of that. I don't need to work as a waiter.
You don't have to work at any available job सिर्फ इसलिए कि मुझे minimum wage
हाँ,
मिल जाए.
मुझे मज़ा भी आ सकता है. I enjoy being in the kitchen, so why don't I work in the kitchen? So at that time, what I did was there was like some basic certifications that I had to get to be able to work in a kitchen in London. So there was food safety, allergen safety, and like a lot of certifications like that. So all of those which made me a chef. So I got all of those, and I got all of those certifications. I got my chef's coat, I got my safety boots and stuff, and I started working in kitchens. So I think during work, and I used to get a better pay out of working in kitchens. The pay was pretty good. So I worked in like 4 or 5 different restaurants, out of which one of the restaurants was a Michelin star restaurant as well. It was a very, very high pressured environment. I think it was the hardest job I've ever done. But another thing was that it was the job where I learned the most, because the environment was strictly military. Everyone was, there. I had to come there at 6 a.m. in the morning, and it was like a 10-hour shift. And being, someone who worked at a 0-hour contract, people who get paid hourly, they used to squeeze every inch out of me. उनको होता था कि यार अगर इसको हम 1 घंटे के पैसे दे रहे हैं तो 1 घंटे इसको फ्री नहीं बिठा सकते हम लोग. So in that sense, I had to work a lot. And even though I had to work stringently, I managed to work. Obviously, it was not much, but I still managed to work like 2-3 weeks in that restaurant. After that, I was like, "Bhai, ye nahi ho raha." It was a very, very high pressured environment, and I used to wash dishes like 10 hours a day without like breaks. I had like a 10-minute break in between. So, but the fact was that during my time in all of these 4-5 restaurants, I earned a good amount of money. And I didn't know. I think जब मेहनत से पैसे कमाते हो ना तो मन नहीं करता उसको बस उड़ा देने का. So I think what I did was I collected all of that money and I bought some gifts on my way back home. At that time, I think the idea of Bloom sparked, because when I gifted all of those gifts to my parents, my mother was like so much surprised कि यार, how did you get so much money? So I was like, yeah, I worked at kitchens, and then I told her the whole story that I got my certifications as a chef. Now I can work as a chef in London, and I can do a lot of things. So that really sparked her, and she was the one who asked me that, okay, you like to work in the kitchens, you like being in the culinary world, so why didn't you do something in the culinary realm? So at the first thought that I had after hearing that was, ऐसा नहीं हो सकता. Like this is absurd. Because the small 5-year-old kid who has always been seeing jewelry around him and who knows कि यार लाइफ में यही करना है, उसको अगर आप सडनली एक ऑप्शन दो, सो फर्स्ट तो माइंड ब्लॉक हो गया मेरा कि यार नहीं हो सकता.
यू स्टार्ट रिजेक्टिंग इट
या
क्योंकि
यू
एक
स्टार्ट
प्री
रिजेक्टिंग.
कंसीव नोशन बना हुआ है कि ज्वेलरी का काम करना है.
हाँ, तो मेरे दिमाग में आया कि यार ये तो हो ही नहीं सकता. मॉम डिडंट फोर्स मी. मॉम वाज लाइक कि सी इट्स योर चॉइस. आई वाज लाइक कि एंड at the same time I was rejecting the idea. The other side of me was like, this is brilliant, like this is something I want to do. So I think I took a few days. I contemplated it. A few days, I think it was just a week. I just thought it out for 7 days. And I think the most important part was that I fixed it on me. ऐसा नहीं किया मैंने कि यार सोचा. जैसे प्रॉब्लम ये होती है कि इंसान सोचता है कि मेरे को यार ये आइडिया है, आई कैन डू दिस, बट वो सोचता ही रह जाता है.
They don't act upon
Yeah,
it.
I think doing is a lot more important than just thinking about it.
Also harder.
It's harder. Obviously, it's harder. But like just taking the first step is the hardest. But if you take the first step, then you should not retract backwards. You should look at, आगे देखना चाहिए, पीछे नहीं आना चाहिए वापस.
See through the idea. पूरी तरह से उसको explore कर लो.
So I took 4-5 days and I made up my mind कि यार अगर मैं ये कर रहा हूँ, I don't want to come back. This is something that I will do for my life now. And I was pretty happy about it.
In 7 days, you had the conviction that this is something I want to do forever now. I am completely sold on the idea.
Yeah, I mean, obviously 7 days में you can't be like कि मेरे को 10 साल के लिए मैं sorted हूँ, अब यही करूँगा मैं लाइफ में. Because I had no pathways. Like there was, जैसा मैंने बताया, I had no family influence in F&B industry. There's no one near me who was into F&B. So I was scared because my parents were like, we will be there to support you to the maximum. But we can't help you in that sense कि, we can't guide you how to do it because we don't know how to do it. So they were like, you have to figure your own way out. So there was this dual thinking also which was happening. But at the same time I was like कि चलो एक बार मैंने फर्स्ट स्टेप यही सोच के लिया था कि अगर कुछ नहीं भी हुआ तो आई हैव अ बैकअप. बट आई नेवर टुक दैट बैकअप एज सेफ्टी नेट दैट ये तो चलो बैकअप है तो एफर्ट ही कम लगा. आई वॉज लाइक कि बैकअप इज समथिंग आई नेवर वुड वॉन्ट टू फॉलो ऑन टू. तो मैंने ये 7 days में ये सोचा था, बस अपने दिमाग में मैंने ये इतना कन्विंस कर लिया अपने आप को कि हाँ ये मेरे को लाइफ टाइम करना है. और बैकअप है पर लेकिन बैकअप के ट्रैप में नहीं करना है मुझे कि बैकअप है तो एफर्ट ही कम डाली.
बट द रीजन देयर इज अ बैकअप, देयर इज ऑल्सो एन ऑब्लिगेशन कि अब मैं पूरी तरीके से इस चीज़ को ट्राई कर सकता हूँ. देयर इज नो थ्रेट कि यार अगर ये नहीं हुआ देन आई एम नो वेयर. सो दैट्स समथिंग दैट गिव्स यू अ गुड ग्राउंडिंग.
Yeah, I think that was one of the reasons which I was very privileged to have. So मैंने सोचा कि चलो ठीक है, लेट्स ट्राई फर्स्ट. बट ट्राई क्या होता है कि इंसान सोचता है कर लेंगे ना, कि अभी तो हम 19 के हैं, अभी क्या दिक्कत है, आराम से 21-22 के बाद जब कॉलेज खत्म होगा तब देख लेंगे. बट द ओनली थिंग दैट वाज डिफरेंट विद मी वाज कि 19 का तो मैं हूँ, बट मुझे कॉलेज के बाद क्या करना होगा मुझे तो पता नहीं. मेरे सारे फ्रेंड्स का पता है कि दे लाइक समवन इज गोइंग टू इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंकिंग, समवन इज गोइंग टू कंसल्टेंसी, एवरीवन नोज देयर पाथवे. इफ आई एम नॉट गोइंग टू ज्वेलरी, व्हाट एम आई गोइंग टू डू? I need to have something to work on. So that's when I started formulating the idea कि चलो I know what to do, I know I have to do something in the F&B industry. Now what is it? So I instantly started my market research, and it was not just sitting on the laptop and spending 5 hours. On top of researching on the internet, I used to actually go into the market whenever I used to come back from London during my breaks. मैं actually जाता था malls, मैं market जाता था बहुत बहुत ज़्यादा, पूरे पूरे दिन. और जाके ये नहीं कि लोगों से मिल रहा हूँ, ये मैं बस जाता था और ऑब्जर्व करता था कि कैफ़ेज़ में काम होता कैसे है. क्योंकि आई हैड नो पर्सन टू एक्सप्लेन मी कि यार ऐसे ही काम होता है, इतना स्टाफ चाहिए होता है, ये चाहिए होता है. देयर वाज अ कम्प्लीटली ब्लैंक स्क्रिप्ट इन फ्रंट ऑफ मी दैट आई हैड टू फिल. तो मेरे को पर्सनली जाना होता था. मेरे को पहले अपना आइडिया बनाना पड़ा कि ये होता कैसे है, ये होता क्या है. ठीक है, मेरे को खाना बनाने का शौक है. I'm a very passionate person who loves to be in the kitchen. But what is the business side of it? What is the side that is actually, getting you somewhere?
Yeah.
So, and again, I was studying business management. So there was, and my family had a history of business. So there was a business mindset also towards this. कि यार business wise ये क्या चीज़ है? So that was something that I started working on slowly and steadily. And over 2 years, COVID was one thing that came in between, which actually boosted the whole thought because I had a lot more time with myself.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone had a break, so I was also having a big break. I knew that I wanted to start when I came back from college in 2021, but you don't have that much time during college. That 1 year gave me a big break. That 1 year gave me a lot of time to think the concept, to well formulate it. So I think during my research, what I found was that there are. So I love desserts, and as I mentioned, I started with baking a cake, and I baked a lot. So this was something that I was very comfortable with, and at the same time, my household is a purely vegetarian household. We don't use eggs in anything. So what I did at home was I research again, जैसे मैंने आपको बताया, I used to dig deep into the recipes. So I used to watch a lot of recipes. I used to understand why this egg is being used. What is the scientific reason this egg is being used for? अब उस रीज़न को एक्सप्लोर करते करते मैं अपनी एगलेस रेसिपीज़ बनाने लगा. जब मेरे को पता चल जाता था कि अच्छा ये अंडे से ये हो रहा है, फॉर एग्जांपल अगर सिर्फ एक लेवनिंग एजेंट है तो उसकी जगह पे हम क्या डाल सकते हैं, व्हाट इज समथिंग दैट कैन रिप्लेस इट completely so that the chemical reaction that is happening in the baking process is still intact, and we also replace the ingredient. So that made me, so this curiosity and this whole scientific explanation जानने का reasoning, this made me develop my own recipes, and I developed a new niche which was eggless baking. So eggless baking in India at that time, and still somewhat, was that it's a very underlooked thing. And even when what happened was, जब मैंने ये सब सोचा कि मैंने तब मेरे को ये लगा, जब मैं मार्केट रिसर्च करता था तब मुझे ये लगा कि यार यहाँ पे बेक्स तो बहुत सारे हैं, केक सबके पास है, चीज़ केक सबके पास है, पर जिस बेकरी में मैं जा रहा हूँ एगलेस ऑप्शन में एक चीज़ पाइनएप्पल पेस्ट्री फॉर ब्लैक फॉरेस्ट पेस्ट्री, चीज़ केक तो है ही नहीं एगलेस, एक आध को शायद मिल जाए कहीं पे चीज़ केक, और उसमें पूछो तो जेलेटिन.
And North India has a fairly decent like vegetarian population. People who
Yes.
prefer an eggless dessert.
Yes. So I knew my whole family was a vegetarian family. I knew a lot of my friends who were vegetarians. And I knew a lot of people who were vegetarians but were eating eggs in cakes.
Yeah.
So this was solely because there were no cakes without eggs. So they were like, यार इतना compromise नहीं कर सकते, केक खाना है तो एग खाना पड़ेगा. तो ये रीज़न की वजह से there were a lot of people who were eating eggs in cakes.
So you saw an untapped territory.
I saw an untapped territory there. तो उस वजह से I started researching more and more. I was thinking कि यार this can be a nice concept for my brand. It's a very challenging concept to pull off because making a whole range of bakes without eggs was somewhat challenging, and I had to make my own recipes. So I was the cooking eggless since my childhood only. So I had a few recipes in my hand, and on top of that I started making more and more. So that is, I think, something that I did during the whole 3-year process after during 2018 and 2021. एंड आई थिंक इसके बाद एक बार मेरी एगलेस रेसिपी सब रेडी हो गई तो मेरे को बिजनेस साइड ऑफ थिंग्स देखना था. तो फिर मैंने ये देखा कि अच्छा टीम में कितने लोग चाहिए होते हैं. अब मुझे ये सब समझने के लिए मुझे ऐसा लगा कि आई हैड टू हैव सम प्रोफेशनल एक्सपीरियंस. So this was the time that I decided to join some culinary schools as well, because I was doing King's College ka degree, but the problem was that they don't allow you to do a full-time degree alongside. So what I did was I opted for various courses across culinary institutes like Le Cordon Bleu in London, which is one of the top culinary schools in the world, by the way, and the second was IICA, International Institute of Culinary Arts, which is in Delhi. So during my holidays I used to go there, or sometimes जैसे हमारा समर ब्रेक बहुत लंबा होता था, it was from June to August end, so all of those months were utilized in culinary schools. What I did was IIC में पहले गया, वहाँ पे भी they used to teach. I did like this summer course, so they used to teach all egg wala bakes, and I used to ask the chef कि यार how can we make this eggless. The chef was very confused कि what is he asking, like this is something
ये तो prerequisite है, माना हुआ है कि इसमें egg डलेगा ही डलेगा.
वो कह रहे थे कि आप ये कर क्यों रहे हो कोर्स, मतलब जो आप कह रहे हो वो नहीं हो सकता. So he was very reluctant कि आप जो सिखा रहे हैं वो सीखो ना. Le Cordon Bleu में भी सेम चीज़ हुई. IIC आई थॉट कि चलो हो सकता है कि यहाँ पे लोग ओपन ना हो इस चीज़ के लिए. मैंने सोचा लंदन में जाके ट्राई करते हैं. मैंने लंदन में ट्राई किया, वहाँ पे भी लोगों ने सेम, वहाँ पे तो लोगों ने डांट ही दिया मेरे को कि गेट लॉस्ट. सो आई रियलाइज कि देयर इज दिस वेरी वेरी बिग अनटैप्ड मार्केट कि लोग तो कर ही नहीं रहे ये चीज़, एंड जिससे पूछो कि कैसे करना है वो भी कह रहा है छोड़ो यार ये सब होता ही नहीं है. तो आई हैड दिस मिशन कि मेरे को तो अब यही करना है. मेरे को ऐसी चीज़ बनानी है जो इंसान खा के पता ही ना लगा सके कि एगलेस है या नहीं है, बट एट द सेम टाइम एगलेस हो वो.
It serves the purpose.
इट सर्व्स द पर्पस.
I wanted to come to this question. So, the intention with us sitting here is one, to of course learn from the journey that you've been through, for other people to know what people around them are doing. But also, if someone is a young chef or an entrepreneur who's trying to break into the industry, for them to learn from your experiences as to how they can get in the same journey as yours. So, guide us through, like, we understand you have to build a niche and you have to identify one, but guide us through what other things does it take to build a restaurant? Like, how do you, so I have a series of questions here, but let's begin with, how do you craft a menu? How do you come up with an idea? Okay, this is my niche, but how many units do I need? How many dishes do I need? SKUs, as they say. And how do you begin with just like crafting a menu for a restaurant?
So I think when I started with all of this, again I had zero experience. So I just was. So what I did first was I made a master menu. A master menu, something where you just write everything that you can make or everything that you want to make, and draft it into one register, one list or something. Out of that, you start selecting. Okay, these are the dishes I actually want to keep in my menu. The other dishes are buffer. So
And how do you make that decision as to which ones do you want to keep and which ones do you want to keep in a buffer?
I think that's a purely not a personal choice, but a choice which depends on the business research that you've done.
Okay.
Which area are you opening at? What are your customers looking for? I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make while starting a restaurant or making a menu, if they're passionate cooks themselves, is that the fact that they want to serve what they want to eat or what they want to cook. But the fact is that you should definitely, I'm not against the idea of making your own, crafting your own ideas into the menu. But also, ये आपका business है, and this is something you're not doing, you're not cooking for your dinner party at home. So you have to look what your customer is asking for at the same time.
It's important to find a product market fit कि आप जो supply कर रहे हो market में उसकी demand है या नहीं.
हाँ, अगर मान लो आपको 25 प्रोडक्ट्स रखने हैं और उसमें से आप अपने प्रोडक्ट्स रखना चाहते हो, तो ये आप ये नहीं कर सकते कि 20 प्रोडक्ट्स आपने एकदम एक्सपेरिमेंटल और अपने रख लिए और 5 प्रोडक्ट्स में आपने कुछ खेल दिया. यू हैव टू हैव अ मिनिमम ऑफ लाइक 50% मेन्यू विच पीपल कैन एक्सेप्ट एंड पीपल कैन बाय. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अगर इंडिया में मैं कोई बहुत ही कंफ्यूजिंग सा डिश रख दूँ विद गूसबेरीज एंड आमंड्स एंड हनीज, तो people will not understand the dish. People like to have chocolate truffle pastry, which is the basic thing. So I have to have something like a chocolate truffle pastry, which will get me some numbers so that at least I can run my restaurant.
And also, a customer has made the daring choice of entering a new restaurant. Up they want something more familiar. You can't give them two unfamiliar things back to back, right?
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing. कि if you have, so see, there are two things to this. आपने नया ब्रांड बनाया वो ठीक है, और आपने नया ब्रांड में नई चीज़ें रखी वो भी ज़रूरी है, बिकॉज यू कांट हैव अ न्यू ब्रांड एंड जस्ट कीप ब्लैक फॉरेस्ट थिंग्स एंड नॉर्मल द रेगुलर पेस्ट्रीज. सो इट्स रियली इंपॉर्टेंट टू हैव समथिंग which defines you, which is your own product. But at the same time, it's really important to place some percentage of it as a safe menu. कि चलो अगर ये नहीं बिकता है या ये जब तक बिक रहा है तब तक ये चीज़ मेरी ओवरहेड्स निकाल दे, ये चीज़ मेरा रनिंग कॉस्ट निकाल दे, मेरी सैलरीज निकाल दे, मेरा बिजली का खर्चा निकाल दे. अगर मैं अपना रनिंग कॉस्ट बिल्कुल ही कवर नहीं कर पा रहा, सी ऑब्वियसली फर्स्ट ईयर में कोई नहीं कवर कर सकता. First year is always the year of loss making, you would say, or the year of experimentation. So first year में नहीं हो रहा है वो कोई बात नहीं है, but लेकिन it's very important to have at least some cost covered so that at least आप एकदम ही सिंक में नहीं जा रहे. And you should be aware कि आपका प्रोडक्ट कितना एक्सेप्ट हो रहा है. You should do a lot of tastings, a lot of trials. अपने प्रोडक्ट लोगों को खिलाओ, चाहे फ्री में खिलाओ आप, बट लेकिन आप उनको खिलाओ और उनसे फीडबैक लो. आपका प्रोडक्ट आपको तो बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है, बट यू शुड नॉट बी इन दिस डिल्यूजनल वर्ल्ड कि आपको लग रहा है आपका प्रोडक्ट बेस्ट है, पर लेकिन लोगों को तो बिल्कुल बेकार लग रहा है. अगर वो है तो फ़ायदा क्या है फिर आपके प्रोडक्ट का? आपको अच्छा लग रहा है पर बाकियों को अच्छा नहीं लग रहा है, तो दैट्स नॉट द राइट वे टू डू.
Your feedback loop should be very, very consistent. कि जितना जल्दी you can understand things, you can change them, you can tweak them. That'll serve better for you.
Yes, and I think you should not be afraid of change at all, because change is something which will happen very very fast in business. And मान लो मैंने मेन्यू बना के 25 आइटम्स उसमें रखे और उसमें मैंने अपने पसंद से जो जो आइटम्स रखे उसमें से कई सारी चीज़ें लोगों को पसंद आनी बंद हो गई फर्स्ट मंथ के बाद. हो सकता है, एंड दिस इज़ अ वेरी फाइन बैलेंस दैट यू हैव टू मेक, कि कई बार ऐसा होता है कि देयर इज ओनली अ segment, only a sample size of population that doesn't like your menu, but others do like it. So you have to be very, very aware of the feedback again. कि आपका मान लो अगर प्रोडक्ट है वो 100 में से 10 लोगों को ख़राब लग रहा है या 50 लोगों को ख़राब लग रहा है. तो अगर 10 ही लोगों को ख़राब लग रहा है तो 90 लोगों को अच्छा भी तो लग रहा है, तो ये इंपॉर्टेंट है। एंड हो सकता है जो 50 लोगों को ख़राब लग रहा है, कई बार इंसान सोचता है कि यार इसको ना अकल नहीं है टेस्ट की, ही डजंट नो। सो यू ट्राई, यू आप उनको ट्राई करो ना जो आपको लगता है कि जानते होंगे वो टेस्ट को। अगर आपको कोई फ्रेंड है, कोई फैमिली है, उसको ट्राई कराओ। अगर वो बोल रहा है कि अच्छा है, तो हो सकता है कि आपका कुछ स्कोप हो। अगर आपको सभी लोग बोल रहे हैं कि यार इतना कुछ खास नहीं है या फिर ठीक है, तो आप ये मत सोचो कि यार मेरा प्रोडक्ट फेल हो गया। इससे फेलियर से डरने से बिल्कुल भी फ़ायदा नहीं है। बिकॉज अगर आपने कुछ बनाया और लोगों को वो अच्छा नहीं लगा, तो ज़रूरी नहीं है कि वो ख़राब ही है, हो सकता है वो मार्केट में एक्सेप्ट नहीं हो पा रहा है। तो बट यूज टू बी वेरी डायनेमिक कि अगर नहीं एक्सेप्ट हो पा रहा है तो चेंज करो उसको।
But like you said, it's thoda hard to make that balance between your creativity and the business aspect of it,
Mhm.
right? When you make something, you have such a solid personal attachment to it that it's sometimes hard to detach and not take the criticism to your heart.
Yeah, that's very true.
But it shouldn't be that way. When you're building a business, you have to understand what your consumer wants and keep tweaking it till it gets to that perfect point.
You should always, मैं तो ये बोलूँगा, you should always have some of your products which define you, and you should try to market it, try to sell it. But don't be afraid to keep those products as well, which actually bring in some business. And जैसे हम लोगों ने शुरू में जब स्टार्ट किया था, हम लोगों ने भी हैड, पहले मैंने जब एकदम स्टार्ट किया था तब मैंने बिल्कुल ही एक्सपेरिमेंटल मेन्यू रखा हुआ था। एंड देन व्हेन आई रियलाइज्ड कि 2 वीक्स में लोग आके ना डिस्प्ले देख के चले जा रहे हैं बस, एंड उनको ट्राई कराना बहुत मुश्किल हो रहा है मेरे लिए। देन आई स्टार्टेड रिप्लेसिंग दोज सम ऑफ दोज डिशेज स्लोली, कि चलो यार एक बार, आई वॉज कम्प्लीटली अगेंस्ट हैविंग अ पाइनएप्पल पेस्ट्री इन माई कैफे, बट वट आई डिड वॉज आई डिड हैव अ पाइनएप्पल पेस्ट्री, आई गिव इट माई ओन टच, आई tweaked it a little, but I still had that name कि this is a pineapple pastry. तो I those some of those desserts, blueberry cheesecake, pineapple pastry, New York cheesecake, the products that are already accepted in the market, I had some of those which actually gave me some movement. तो उससे मेरा रेस्टोरेंट थोड़ा चल पा रहा था। तो मुझे लग रहा था कि चलो यहाँ पे लोग आ रहे हैं। क्या होता है कि मान लो वो बंदा जो एक बार आया, उसको ब्लूबेरी चीज़ केक अच्छा लगा, दूसरी बार के दोबारा खा के गया, तीसरी बार में वो शायद विलिंग होगा कि कुछ ट्राई कर ले। पर अगर वो फर्स्ट टाइम ही आया और उसने कुछ नया प्रोडक्ट ट्राई किया और उसको कन्फ्यूजिंग लगा, तो वो ज़िंदगी में दोबारा नहीं आएगा
You
और
have
ना वो
to
अपने
build
किसी
that
फ्रेंड्स को नहीं
trust.
लाएगा।
You have to build that trust very, very slowly.
तो अगर उसको आपका ब्लूबेरी चीज़ केक पसंद है ना, तब वो जाके आपका ब्लैकबेरी चीज़ केक खाएगा। तो
Very true.
दिस इज समथिंग विच यू हैव टू बी वेरी केयरफुल कि यू डोंट लूज कस्टमर्स जस्ट लाइक दैट, कि यू हैव टू नॉट बी इतना ज़्यादा रिलक्टेंट कि मैं तो यार यही बेचूंगा, मेरे को तो यही बेचना है। आप बनाओ अपना नीश, पर इतना ज़्यादा हैवी मत हो जाओ अपने ऊपर कि मेरे को तो यही बेचना है लाइफ में और मेरे को इसी को पॉपुलर करना है। बिकॉज आई थिंक दैट्स माई साइड ऑफ थिंकिंग, एंड दैट्स हाउ आई थिंक आई वॉज एबल टू स्केल टू 3 outlets within 2 years.
And how critical is how you name your products? Because I go to certain restaurants or cafes, the name is so fancy, you don't understand what the product is. And then you get hesitant, but hoga kuch wohi jo you would know, otherwise you'd be very familiar with, but it's just phrased in a certain manner. So how critical is that? What has your experience been with naming certain products?
आई थिंक इट्स वेरी फनी बिकॉज एक्चुअली वो जो नाम लिखा होता है फैंसी रेस्टोरेंट्स में, वो इंग्रेडिएंट्स का ही नाम लिखा होता है, बट सम ऑफ द इंग्रेडिएंट्स आर सो uncommon that it's very unfamiliar amongst the regular crowd. For example, if I write porcini is actually a mushroom which is coming from Italy. It's an Italian variant of a mushroom. So it's actually a mushroom only. I can write a mushroom pasta, but I write porcini pasta because I'm making that effort of getting that Italian mushroom, which is a very expensive mushroom, into my pasta. So that's the reason I would write it, and that's the reason I would be able to sell it also. अगर मैं बताऊंगा नहीं कि मैंने इसमें पोर्चिनी मशरूम डाला है, तो मैं उसको कैसे महंगा बेच सकूंगा? मेरे लिए महंगा बन तो गया, अब मुझे महंगा बेचना पड़ेगा उसको। मैं महंगा कैसे बेचूंगा? अगर मैंने मशरूम पास्ता लिख दिया, बंदा बोलेगा यार 100 रुपये का तो मेरे को वो भी दे रहा था, ये क्यों 500 रुपये का दे रहा है? तो वो चीज़ के लिए हमें रखना पड़ता भी है। सो इफ़ यू आर यूजिंग समथिंग फैंसी, if you're using something which is out of the box, you should mention that you're using it. It's very important to correctly market your products so that you can sell it at a price that is sufficient for you to run your business as well. आप फूड कॉस्ट बढ़ा लो अननेसेसरीली और आप अपना सेलिंग प्राइस बिल्कुल ही कम रख लो, तो ऐसा हो नहीं सकता। ऑल्दो जैसे हम लोगों ने जब स्टार्ट किया, तो हम लोगों ने, हमारे फूड कॉस्ट हमारे बहुत ज़्यादा थे, जो अभी भी काफ़ी ज़्यादा हैं। हम लोग बिल्कुल फ्रेंच क्रीम यूज़ करते हैं, हम वी आर वेरी कीन ऑन यूजिंग द टॉप मोस्ट इंग्रेडिएंट्स। एंड जैसे मैंने आपको बताया, ब्लूम वॉज नॉट अ प्रॉफिट मेकिंग प्रोजेक्ट, इट वॉज अ पैशन प्रोजेक्ट. When I started, I had a backup. I had a lot of privileges. Because of those, I think I did never focus on money. And I think it's really important to have passion as your centric point when you're doing business, because money will eventually follow. बट अगर आप शुरू से ही बोलो यार मेरे को ना इतने तो कमाने ही कमाने हैं, तो उससे क्या होता है कि आप ऐसे डिसीजंस ले लेते हो जो आपके फेवर में नहीं है, जो कस्टमर के फेवर में नहीं है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, आप क्वालिटी गिरा दोगे प्रोडक्ट की, या पैसे नहीं आ रहे, प्राइस नहीं मिल रही, क्वालिटी गिरा दी,
Let me
सस्ता कर
expand
दिया.
my margins.
लेट मी एक्सपैंड माई मार्जिन. स्टाफ बेकार रख लोगे, आप कुछ भी कर सकते हो. देर आर इनन्यूमरल पॉसिबिलिटीज. बट टू हैव दैट परफेक्ट थिंग, बिकॉज द मार्केट इज़ वेरी कम्पिटेटिव नाउ. इट्स नॉट कि आप रेगिस्तान में एक कैफ़े हो जहाँ पे सब लोग आपके पास ही आएंगे. सो टू हैव दैट सेगमेंट इन योर थिंग, कि आप लोगों को, आपके पास ऐसा कुछ होना चाहिए कि लोग एक बहुत ही एस्टैब्लिश्ड 25 साल पुराने बेकरी को छोड़ के आपके पास आ रहे हैं, क्यों आएंगे आपके पास? आपके पास कुछ होना चाहिए ऑफर करने के लिए उसको. सो आई थिंक दैट इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. एंड जैसे हमारे प्रोडक्ट कॉस्ट हमारे शुरू में ज़्यादा थे, बट आई kept the prices fairly lower. My prices were superseding according to market standards very ज़्यादा. बट लेकिन मैंने अपने प्रोडक्ट्स को बहुत मीडियम प्राइस रखा. आई वॉच द कंपेटिटर्स प्राइसिंग एंड आई ट्राई टू प्राइस माई सेल्फ 10% डाउन ऑल्सो. दिस वॉज द इनिशियल स्ट्रैटेजी फॉर मी टू गेट द कस्टमर्स इन, सो दैट पीपल हैव दिस. सी, इंडिया इज़ अ वेरी प्राइस सेंसिटिव मार्केट.
Yeah.
एंड अगर इंसान को 10 रुपये की पैटी मिल रही है और दूसरी जगह 12 रुपये की मिल रही है, तो 10 रुपये की वो खाएगा. उसको वो मतलब नहीं है कि 2 रुपये के लिए उसको एक्स्ट्रा चल के जाना पड़ेगा, उसको ज़्यादा लाइन में लगना पड़ेगा. उसको कोई मतलब नहीं है. उसको वो 2 रुपये बचाने हैं. एवरी वन वॉन्ट्स टू सेव मनी. सो अगर कोई आपके पास आ रहा है और उसको चीज़ के खाना है, और उसको वो सेम चीज़ के किसी XYZ ब्रांड पे 350 का मिल रहा है, आपके यहाँ 300 का मिल रहा है, तो वो आपके यहाँ ले लेगा एक बार ट्राई करने के लिए. एटलीस्ट ट्राई किया उसने आपका प्रोडक्ट. आपने सस्ते में बेचा, कोई बात नहीं. अगर उसने आपका प्रोडक्ट ट्राई किया तो एटलीस्ट उसको आपके ब्रांड के बारे में पता चला. उसको अगर प्रोडक्ट अच्छा लगा तो वो अपने फ्रेंड्स को लेकर आएगा, अपनी फैमिली को लेकर आएगा, वो अपने फ्रेंड्स को लेकर आएंगे. सो यू स्टार्ट बिल्डिंग अ नेटवर्क, यू स्टार्ट बिल्डिंग अ वेब. बट इफ़ यू आर वेरी रिलक्टेंट कि मेरे को तो इतना महंगा बेचना है, ये करना है, वो करना है, तो देन आपका प्रोडक्ट कोई ट्राई नहीं कर पाएगा. अगर कोई ट्राई नहीं करेगा तो फिर आप मार्केट कैसे बनाओगे अपनी?
You have to eliminate those initial barriers. But how do you price your products? Because there's a food cost, then there are other fixed costs like your salaries for employees, rent, electricity, and other things. Is there a mathematical formula as to how you compute it? Because even in coffee, like you said, India is a price sensitive market, and market mein to there are multiple options. There's a 60 rupee coffee, there's a 100 rupee coffee, 170, 210, 230. So how do you get to that number?
आई थिंक a lot of it now can happen with competitive pricing. आप आसपास देखो लोग क्या बेच रहे हैं और कितने का बेच रहे हैं. सी, फॉर दैट यू हैव टू हैव अ वेरी गुड नॉलेज ऑफ व्हाट यू आर सेलिंग. एंड दैट्स द रीजन आई टेल पीपल, फूड बिजनेस इज नॉट समथिंग कि भाई आप बस ग्लैमर के लिए आ गए. आपको पता होना चाहिए आप क्या बेच रहे हो, आपको पता होना चाहिए आप क्या रख रहे हो अपने पास. तो अगर मेरे को ये पता होगा कि हाँ भाई मैंने बहुत अच्छी क्वालिटी की कॉफ़ी रखी हुई है और सामने वाला बेकार क्वालिटी की 100 रुपये की बेच रहा है, तो मैं अच्छी क्वालिटी की 150 रुपये की बेच सकता हूँ. सो दिस इज़ वन वे ऑफ प्राइसिंग द प्रोडक्ट्स. And I think it depends on a lot of factors. If you're a fine dining restaurant, then you have a lot more overheads. So, and that's the reason hotels like Taj have a very, very premium pricing. Obviously, there is a brand value attached. You get a very amazing service, and they are paid good salaries. The waiters are paid good salaries because of those service. The managers are paid those salaries. You are entering into a very, very exclusive environment, uh, which might be having a very high rent. So a lot of factors determine your product pricing. आप किस लोकेशन पे हो सकता है. अगर मैं खान मार्केट में हूँ, द मार्केट रेंट इज़ अमेजिंगली हाई. सो उस केस में मेरे को प्राइसिंग हो सकता है ज़्यादा रखनी पड़े. तो यू हैव टू कैलकुलेट योर ओन ओवरहेड्स, यू हैव टू डिवाइज योर ओन प्लान, सी योर competitors pricing, and then you can get a fairly good idea of how to price your products.
And so I wanted to talk about your social media distribution because that's how I first discovered your brand. I know now most people find new restaurants experiences through social media, which is why digital presence is very, very critical. How do you or Bloom differentiates themselves in their social media presence? How do you build that community around your cafe?
I think, as you mentioned, social media is one of the key marketing tools right now we can use, because the whole generation, not just our generation, but the generation above and below us, everyone is on social media. From a 5-year old, I've seen to a 10-year, 12-year-old kids also in Instagram now. So I think it really helps you if you have a very strong Instagram profile. And at the same time, see, you have to market your products, and you can do that very easily. Now people have shoots, people get their products photographed, they post it on Instagram with basic captions. But I think what we do different is, first of all, I am the chef and the founder. So that adds up as a story. So I try to tell people that, okay, this is a passion project and this is not something which is just a profit making machine. So people need to have that trust in my brand that, okay, this is a person who is cooking himself, and who is behind this brand, they can trust. So attaching a face is really important to the brand for me, and that's how I have started the brand. And at the same time, I tell people it's very important to communicate your product. So I tell people myself that, okay, this is the quality of products that we're using, this is the chocolate we're using, this is the cream we're using, and this is the place where we get our flour from. So explaining the whole journey of your product is really important, because that helps you build that trust कि okay, this guy is actually getting his products from good places. Because photo देख के people can only be tempted कि छी यार अच्छा दिख रहा है, खाना है. But knowing the journey of the product really helps them process that information through their central route. उससे उनका दिमाग चलता है कि यार ये है, ये यहाँ से आ रहा है, मेरे को ये ट्राई करना है.
If I'm paying extra, so ये चीज़ें इसमें आ रही हैं.
And I think it's really, really important in this era to not focus on just the product, but also focus on the service that you're offering. And I think education is one of the best services that you can offer as a brand. So I try to educate my clients, because in India I have seen a lot of mixing, because they have to make their products cheaper. People have to do all sorts of things in their quality in the quality of the product, so that they can make it at an affordable rate. So people should know why we are priced at this certain amount, एंड वाई इज़ दैट गाय. अगर हम लोग 300 रुपये का बेच रहे हैं और सामने वाले पे आपको सेम चीज़ 100 रुपये की मिल रही है, तो वो 200 रुपये का डिफरेंस का जो मीनिंग इन्फॉर्मेशन है, पीपल शुड बी इन्फॉर्म्ड अबाउट इट. ऐसा नहीं लगना चाहिए किसी को यार ये सिर्फ 300 रुपये का ऐसे ही बेच रहा है, बिकॉज एवरी वन हैज़ अ रीज़न वाई दे आर प्राइस्ड हाई. सो आई थिंक आई रियली ट्राई टू कम्युनिकेट वाई वी आर प्राइस्ड हाई. वाई इज़ इट दैट वी आर यूजिंग दिस, why is it that we are selling the same product at 300 rupees, which the other person is selling at 150. उसके में फिर हम लोग पूरा उसको समझाते हैं कि यार हमने यहाँ से लाए हैं हम सामान, ये क्वालिटी डिफरेंस है. एजुकेटिंग पीपल बिटवीन द डिफरेंस विद द डिफरेंस बिटवीन couverture and compound. These are both chocolates, but actual chocolate is couverture. तो इस तरह की बहुत सारी चीज़ें हैं which is more expensive again. अगर आप अच्छा मैदा यूज़ करोगे इट विल कम एट अ बेटर प्राइस. सो बहुत सारी चीज़ें होती हैं जो इंसान को पता ही नहीं होती कि प्रोडक्ट के पीछे लगी हुई हैं. एंड पीपल थिंक कि यार सस्ते में मिल रहा है यहाँ से ले लो, महंगे में मिल रहा है वो छोड़ दो. तो पीपल शुड नो, अगर वो चूज़ भी कर रहे हैं सस्ता प्रोडक्ट, बट इट शुड बी एन इन्फॉर्म्ड डिसीजन कि यार मेरे को वो अफोर्ड नहीं करना, मैं ये खरीद रहा हूँ. ऐसा नहीं है कि मेरे को मैं किसी को ये नहीं कर रहा अंडरमाइन कि भाई आप यही खरीदो 300 रुपये का यही है. People can buy the 150 rupee product, but they should know what is better in the 300 rupee product. So I think it's really important to tell about your product. And the third thing we also do on social media is building a community. In the sense, so I have tried to incorporate my guests into a lot of things. For example, the music that we play in our cafe is not decided by us, it's decided by our guests. We every now and then we launch a poll on Instagram where we take song suggestions from them and we add all of them to our playlist. So people feel very at one with the cafe. They feel that their music is being played in the cafe. At the same time, I don't focus always on the products. I focus on the people also who are coming at the cafe. So I show people what are the things that can be done in a cafe. For example, I show a business meeting happening in a cafe in our social media. I show picnics happening in a cafe. So I think it's really important to not just focus on one thing. It's very, very, I think now with so much information in our heads and with so much exposure to social media, people are very, bore हो जाते लोग. Attention span, the attention span is reducing every minute. तो अटेंशन स्पैन कम हो और इंसान इतना एक्सपोज्ड हो तो इंसान बहुत जल्दी बोर हो जाता है. अच्छा खाना उसको रोज़ दिख रहा है इंस्टाग्राम पे, पर उसको वो ब्रांड में क्या ऐसा दिख रहा है जो वो जाना चाहता है. देयर इज एस्थेटिक्स, यू हैव टू शो योर एस्थेटिक्स, व्हाट आर यू डूइंग डिफरेंट. अगर आप नॉर्मल लकड़ी का टेबल चेयर लगा के बस बैठे हुए हो तो फिर पीपल विल लाइक ठीक है यार क्या ही है. या तो आपका खाना बहुत अच्छा हो जो लोग आपके पास लाइन में आ रहे हैं. तो आपको अपने आप को मार्केट अच्छे से करना आना चाहिए. आपको पूरी कम्युनिटी उस हिसाब से बनानी चाहिए जिससे कि लोगों के पास और रीजंस हो, सिर्फ अच्छा खाना देखने के अलावा और रीजंस हो कि वो आपके पास आ पाए.
It's not just one thing, but also building the atmosphere around it.
Yeah.
Tabhi you can have like a repeat customer who comes in very, very often, because one-time sale is very easy to do, but like you said, retention has gone down, so it's very hard to keep the customer back in the circle.
Absolutely.
That's very true. So you mentioned that people have different preferences as to what they want to pay, and once they understand what goes into making certain things, they're more confident in buying that. But what trends are you observing? Are people more willing to pay higher or lower for products? Do people care about like healthy products? Are people getting more conscious about उनके जो वो consume कर रहे हैं उसमें ingredients क्या जा रहे हैं? Is that something that you see going up? What are some consumer trends you're observing?
I think consumer power is certainly increasing. And with more and more information available across the internet and the social media, people are making more informed decisions. ऐसा पहले होता था कि लोगों को पता ही नहीं होता था कि यार इसमें लोग बस बोलते थे ये महंगा ये सस्ता है, बट अब एक्चुअली पीपल को लोगों को पता होता है कि ये महंगा क्यों है और वो सस्ता क्यों है. सो पीपल नाउ अंडरस्टैंड दैट थॉट विच इज़ फर्स्ट. ये डेफिनेटली दैट इज़ ट्रू. एंड द सेकेंड, about healthy and healthier choices, I think again there is a very very big shift again towards veganism and vegetarianism as well. There are n number of documentaries on Netflix also which you can see, and उसमें पूरा बताते हैं why people are converting to vegetarianism, why people are converting to veganism, what is there. There is like n number of benefits. You get longevity, you get better life, you get more sustainable life, you feel better, you feel less weight. So you're less prone to diseases. With so many benefits, people are turning to vegetarian, and that's why we also opted for vegetarianism as a brand choice. We only do vegetarian food. We don't use gelatin, we don't use eggs in our food. Even in our catering, we don't use gelatin, we don't use eggs, we don't use any meat. So that is happening. And as for the healthier choice, there is two sides to it. So वैसे क्या होता है कि अगर आप यूरोप वगैरह में जाओ, people eat out because they have to eat out. They're not making meals at their houses. There's not someone who will make their tiffin and send it to their office. In India, people have their tiffin sorted. Even in corporate cities like Bombay, we have dabbawalas.
Yeah.
So tiffin is something that is very widely consumed in India, and people don't prefer eating out itna zyada. Eating out is not a necessity. It's for fun.
It's a luxury.
It's a luxury. So there is this is a transition we're going through where I am seeing some corporate phases also which are growing. For example, Noida and Gurgaon are being institutionalized very fast. Gurgaon में बहुत ज़्यादा corporates हैं. In those areas especially, and in areas where there are more offices in Delhi also, where people are more like people who have migrated to Delhi. Now there is a shift that they don't have that much house help and they just prefer eating out. So in that case, they do want to eat healthy. But the average customer who is eating out for fun, he doesn't want to eat healthy. वो खा इसलिए रहा है बाहर क्योंकि उसको पता है कि उसको आज एक बढ़िया सा चीज़ वाला बर्गर खाना है या उसको बहुत अच्छा क्रीम वाला पास्ता खाना है. He wants to have that serotonin in his head कि मेरे को आज खा के मज़ा आया.
There's a craving for a certain thing.
There's a craving for this. So I think it's really important to focus on which market you're catering to. If you're in London or if you're somewhere else, then a healthy brand would definitely do a lot better because people have to eat out and they would obviously prefer eating healthy. And in India, so we also as a brand, we have a lot of healthy options. We have a lot of healthy choices. But those are not the only things that we do. Because if you focus only on one part of the side, or if you focus on only one side of the coin, then the other side gets completely left. So and people, अब अगर मान लो मेरे पास कोई डिजर्ट खाने आ रहा है तो उसको ज़रूरी नहीं कि उसको शुगर फ्री और वीगन ही चाहिए, उसको टेस्ट भी अच्छा चाहिए कभी कभी. It's not that vegan or sugar free में टेस्ट अच्छा नहीं आ रहा है, but there's certain feeling of sugar high which you get out of eating sugar. So people need that. अगर कोई बहुत परेशान होता है, दिन खराब जा रहा होता है, तो ये नहीं होता कि यार चलो आज वीगन ग्लूटेन फ्री डिजर्ट खाने चलते हैं. मज़ा नहीं आएगा उसका अगर दिमाग ख़राब हुआ है किसी चीज़ से तो उसको चाहिए कि कुछ उसको बढ़िया मिले खाने के लिए. तो ऐसे में it's not wise to have only sugar free or vegan products, especially in a market like India where people don't eat out of necessity. It's a luxurious choice, right?
That's very true. We also want to ensure that people not just understand your ups, but also certain downs, the challenges that you faced, the mistakes that you've made. If you were to make a cheat sheet for someone who is beginning a restaurant now, what would that look like?
I think it's so. For the first point I would like to address is that there is absolutely no cheat sheet. I think it's really important to make mistakes because I can tell you कि यार ये चीज़ें अवॉइड करो और इससे तुम बच जाओगे. बट जब आप कोई गलती करते हो और आप गलती करने के बाद उसको सुधारते हो, then that learning stays with you forever. So and you're always aware of that. So obviously I can definitely guide you through a long list of things that you can avoid. For example, maybe जैसे मैंने आपको mention किया, you should not be very rigid on your product. You should be open to change. It's not wise to do that. Then you should have a very good work environment. I think you should rely on your team and you should not treat them as your staff. I always call them my team and not my staff because they should feel at one with the brand. You should convey your vision to them so that because they're the ones who are actually helping you reach to your goal. So अगर आपने उन्हीं को अंडरमाइन कर दिया तो फिर फ़ायदा नहीं है. And I think one of the most important things is also to be able to delegate. People, like, if you're like very, very passionate about your product, there's a very, very high chance that you would like to do everything yourself because you would like everything to be perfect. But in the real world, if you want to get ahead and if you want to focus on more things, you have to have this trust in your team that you would be able to delegate some tasks to them. आपको सीखना ही पड़ेगा delegate करना. Even if I would say अगर कोई बंदा 100 की जगह 80% भी ठीक कर रहा है आपसे वो टास्क, तो आप दे दो उसको. वो 20% एरर के लिए अगर आप क्रिप करोगे, you'll not end up anywhere. So I think this is very important to take, and you should never be afraid to make mistakes again. This stretches back to the fact of the cheat sheet, but mistakes I think are very important because I learned my whole thing during my mistakes. No one was here to tell me कि यार ये चीज़ नहीं करो इससे ये हो जाएगा, वो चीज़ मत करो इससे वो हो जाएगा. I made mistakes, I had losses, I learned out of them, and now I don't make them. I made them at an early stage. इतनी जल्दी मैंने वो गलतियाँ करी तो उससे क्या हो रहा है कि अगर मेरा बिजनेस बड़ा होता है और मुझे पता है कि वो चीज़ गलत है तो फिर मैं वो अब नहीं करूँगा. The amount of loss that I had to face when I made that mistake was very less compared to if I make it right now. It will be very much more than what it could.
It'll be substantial. Yeah.
It'll be substantial. So I think you should never be able to never be afraid to make mistakes. And even if you are making a mistake, you should never fall into this pool कि यार गलती हो गई कैसे क्या. मैंने देखा है बहुत सारे लोगों में, बहुत सारे यंग माइंड्स में या ब्रांड ओनर्स में ये प्रॉब्लम होती है कि दे स्टार्ट ब्लेमिंग देमसेल्व्स. मेरी गलती है, ये हो गया, मेरी गलती है. अगर गलती हो चुकी है ना, और ये वो लोग क्रिप करते रहेंगे यार मेरे साथ ये हो गया, यार मेरे साथ ये हो गया. अरे हो गया तो हो गया, अब क्या कर सकते हैं वो सोचो. अगर कोई चीज़ हो चुकी है, सी इवन इफ माई टीम मेम्बर्स कम टू मी कि सर ये हो गया, ये हो गया, मैं उनको बोलता हूँ ये सब मुझे मत बताओ क्या हो गया, अब कैसे ठीक होगा ये बताओ. You should have this mindset to focus on the solution and not focus on the problem. If you start developing that mindset ना, अगर आप अपने आप को बोलते रहो जब भी कुछ प्रॉब्लम हुए ना, कभी भी ये मत सोचो कि प्रॉब्लम हो गई, ये सोचो कि सोल्यूशन क्या है. अगर आपने ये माइंडसेट स्टार्ट कर दिया ना, आपको लगेगा प्रॉब्लम्स होती ही नहीं मेरे को. You will slide through all the problems like a piece of cake.
So 2 years now since you've begun the cafe, you now are in a catering venture. You're 24. What's the next milestone for you? What's the next milestone for yourself in your entrepreneurial journey and for Bloom Cafes? Where do you see it going forward?
So for Bloom, I think I never envisioned it as a mass QSR chain like a Starbucks, where I would have like 100 outlets or 50 outlets in one metropolitan city. I always observed it as a niche brand because again, it caters to a very specific audience of vegetarians. It's a 100% vegetarian brand, and so there is two things. Either you can have very less SKUs, which is the amount of things on your menu, selling units, and you can make it very scalable. So you can have like a little more SKUs, but the scalability reduces. So I have made that balance where my SKUs are not that much, but they're not that less कि मैं बहुत जल्दी scale करूँ उसको. I have this fair share of complicated desserts as well because all of them are eggless. All of them requires a lot of different techniques to be made. So it's not easy to just make 100 outlets out of one Bloom Cafe.
It's harder to franchise it.
It's harder to franchise it
because it's harder to teach people how to make those and keep the same quality.
Yeah, because I can easily franchise and I still get like a lot of offers for franchises. But I always tell people that you should be very careful of who you're franchising it to, because a franchise owner is technically, they are paying you, but they're taking your brand. You have built that brand with a lot of hard work and sweat. So आपको बहुत ध्यान रखना पड़ता है अपने ब्रांड का, क्योंकि वो मेक और ब्रेक भी हो सकता है. एंड एट अ फर्स्ट स्टेज, मतलब अगर मान लो मैं अभी दे रहा हूँ, विच इज़ अ वेरी अर्ली स्टेज फॉर अ फ्रेंचाइज, और भी ज़्यादा ध्यान देने की ज़रूरत है. आफ्टर 200 outlets, if one outlet is a bad decision of a franchise, then it doesn't matter. But 3 आउटलेट में चौथा आउटलेट अगर गलत डिसीजन हुआ फ्रेंचाइज का, then it can destroy the whole brand.
Because no one will think this is a franchise manager's mistake. They'll think it's the brand's mistake.
Exactly. स्टारबक्स में लोग बोल देते हैं वो वाला अच्छा नहीं है, ये वाला अच्छा है.
Mm-hmm.
अगर हमने किया तो लोग बोलेंगे ब्लूम अच्छा नहीं है.
Mm-hmm.
तो वो नहीं होना चाहिए. तो आई थिंक इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू सी दैट. एंड आई थिंक in the culinary journey itself, see, I am not just one person who just loves baking. I am a person who loves food in general and who loves to cook every single thing. My personal favorite actually is cooking Indian. So I love cooking anything and everything. And that's the reason also I started catering, because that helped me actually expand my mindset and venture into new dishes. In catering, we create like all sorts of fusions, all sorts of crazy dishes that we come up. चाट में फ्यूज कुछ इंट्रोड्यूस कर देंगे नई चीज़ें. But there are a lot of innovations. There is a lot of scope for innovation. So I think I am focusing on catering a lot more. Bloom, I have tried to make it as autonomous as possible. I have tried to reduce. I have, again, जैसे मैंने आपको बताया, it's very important to delegate. So I have made my team. I have conveyed my vision to them. I have healthy discussions with them, and I try to keep them in loop so that they are able to run the brand even without me.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm there to supervise, and I have to be there to supervise because you can't just leave your cycle. But साइकिल ऐसी होनी चाहिए, अगर आपने पहिया मारा तो पहिया चल रहा है, ये नहीं कि आपको हर बार पेडल मारना ही पड़ रहा है बार 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 बार. सो आई थिंक दैट्स वन थिंग विच इज़ वेरी which I have done for Bloom, and in my future outlets also I would try to make it as autonomous as possible so that I can focus on more and more things. And I really want to take this brand outside India as well. I really want to do a lot with this brand basically.
I want to sum it all up and bring it down to maybe like 3 solid points that you think every young entrepreneur or chef should keep in mind before they begin their business. What would those be?
I think the first point is you should definitely research. Research is very important. You should find your niche and you should develop a product according to your local market. You should not have this thing कि मैं पहले से इंटरनेशनल का बना लूँ. That is very true. You can have a product, but अगर आपने स्टार्ट ही बहुत रफ करी तो आपको स्केल करने में मुश्किल होगी. As a startup, it's harder. Obviously, if you are a very established business, then you can do that. But if you're a startup owner, it's very important to research. And the second point I would say is develop your product, but don't be attached to it. Like we discussed, if you're facing problems, if you're forced to change, don't be afraid of change. Do change your product. You have to you have to make your business work, and you have to survive in the market. So it's not important to just be attached to one product. It's important to be attached to the concept, because you have to it's ये भी बहुत ज़रूरी है कि you have to believe in your concept. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि आपने कॉन्सेप्ट सोच लिया और अब आप सेटअप बैक हो गए 2-3 फेलियर्स लेके कि अरे यार हो नहीं रहा है, अब तो वो हो गया. सो इट्स रियली इंपॉर्टेंट टू एक्चुअली हैव दिस बिलीफ ऑल्सो इन योर प्रोडक्ट. एंड द थर्ड पॉइंट आई वुड से इज अगेन फोकस ऑन द सोल्यूशन. There will be so many problems you will face every single day. Every single day brings a lot of challenges. But if you focus only on the problem, कि आज मेरा ये हो गया, आज मेरा सेल कम है, आज ये हो गया, तो you will be entangled between them. If you have a solution focused mindset, then you will skid through all the problems like anything.
There's been a lot of serious talk, so let's just relax with a nice, fun, rapid fire round. What's your favorite dish on the Bloom menu?
Lotus biscoff cheesecake.
What's a guilty pleasure snack? Something you eat when no one is watching.
Maybe a shahi tukda with rabdi.
What is the strangest request you've had from a customer?
I want a black coffee, not an Americano.
Biggest misconception about the restaurant industry?
That it's very easy and very glamorous, but it's not.
And the best part about being a chef?
To see the smiles on the faces of the people who are eating your food.
That's very wholesome. Thank you. This has been very fun. I hope everyone gets to learn from your journey.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thanks for being here.